All right, folks, on this episode of the podcast, I am up in the Catskills on the Road and Track HQ 400, the Hudson Quattrocento, the Road and Track Experiences event, and I brought my old man along. He's cruising with me in the BMW M8 competition, and so we sat down in his hotel room at Scribner's Catskill Lodge. They did not pay me to say that. To chat about business and answer some of your Patreon business advice questions. And so here it is, my dad, Roger Farah, chilling with me on the Smoking Tire Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Off the Record. We love Off the Record. You know we love Off the Record, and you've heard us talk about Off the Record. In fact, I've got a case pending with Off the Record right now. It's my first one in a little while. I've been a very good boy, but allegedly I've been a very bad boy. But Off the Record is going to help. That's what they do. If you get a ticket, a moving violation of any kind, anywhere in the United States, you need Off the Record. Don't plead guilty. Don't assume it's going to go away. Don't call your friend who's a lawyer and maybe can help you. Wherever you are in the country, even if you get that ticket far from home, Off the Record can help. It is so easy. All you have to do is go to offtherecord.com/TST or download the Off the Record app and use code TST10. That's it. Those two things. You get 10% off all your legal services with Off the Record, and they have an unbelievable success rate. 97% chance of getting those points off of your record. They are so clutch. And it's not just the ticket, right? Your insurance can be impacted, potentially even your livelihood. If you drive for a living and you can't have points on your license, you could risk your job. Off the Record is so clutch in those types of situations. And they've come through with me before. They've come through for some of you fans before. I get a lot of emails and letters about Off the Record, saving your backside. So go to offtherecord.com/TST. Use code TST10 on the Off the Record app. 10% off all legal services with Off the Record. You know them and you love them, and we do too. Beautiful Catskills day.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Crisp, fall.
Hunter Mountain in the background.
Leaves changing.
Oh, you weren't kidding about the sun.
Yeah.
And the cloud moves, it really hits you. That's okay. I'm used to it. I could use some sear on my eyes.
After my surgeries, I cannot.
Oh. Do we need to sunscreen?
No. I'm just can't really get it full face.
Oh.
Full face.
Oh, and the mower's back. Fuck it. Hopefully it'll be okay. Sorry for if you hear some landscaping going on. Oh, looks like they're just using them as transportation. But Scribner's Catskill Lodge, beautiful fall day. The Hudson Quattrocento 400. And I brought you to, it's Take Your Father to Work Day.
It is. I'm a passenger to the Road and Track experience. I love it.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I am.
Is it what you thought it was going to be, pretty much?
Well, I read the itinerary for the 4 days, and it looked interesting. And 2 track days. I mean, that's a lot of good track time for the participants.
Yeah.
And I think you scared a couple people yesterday taking them around the track.
Nobody got out of the car and said they were scared. If anything, they said, "You're smoother at this than my husband."
Yeah.
That was the. Not that I was doing anything crazy, but that's what my job is.
As you said, smooth as speed. So.
Particularly at Lime Rock. Lime Rock is a smooth, flowing track.
Yeah.
Compared to Wilsing Manor, which is a very tight and technical backyard track.
But, a lot of nice people with some really exciting cars, and many of them have driving experience, but some were beginners and were just learning how to handle their own high-powered cars. So
yeah, it's a little strange to me that we attract as many beginners as we do. I wouldn't have thought that.
But you make it comfortable. You and the staff here really figures out what people are capable of, and you don't try to push them beyond what they, their natural fear is. And I think when they got the Miatas, everybody was ready to try to pound it.
Well, you bring out a stopwatch and everybody's a race car driver all of a sudden,
Yeah.
But on the road drives, every year, one or two people say that was a little fast, and one or two people say that was a little slow. So you just can't. I mean,
you get a mix of people. You grade on a curve.
Yeah.
There were beautiful drives the last 2 days through some gorgeous rolling, leaf changing rivers and streams. I mean, other than occasionally getting stuck by a construction truck or some slowpoke, it was gorgeous.
It is. The roads up here are so good. There's so many opportunities to drive them, and the lane etiquette, the passing etiquette of the locals is so much different than, it's so much less friendly than California. In California, on the wine country roads, or even in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee and Kentucky, if people looked in their mirror and saw a group of sports cars, for the most part, they'd pull over and let you by and then go about their day. Here, in the Hudson Valley region, people, and it's not like we're driving like maniacs. I mean, we're driving sports cars on good roads, but we're not doing anything crazy. They seem to be like personally offended that you've come into their area to drive sports cars, and they will go the speed limit for 10 miles. They'll hold you up. We heard of some like road ragey type incidents yesterday where people in trucks were really being terrible to the people in the sports cars, and that's not something that I'm used to in California. They have pretty good etiquette out there about that sort of stuff.
It's interesting. I didn't feel that because I don't have anything to compare it to, but the fact is 80-90% of the time we were cruising, a little bit above the speed limit, but well in control. All following proper signaling and not passing, and it was gorgeous. And 90-minute ride, maybe 2-hour ride is perfect. It was perfect.
We try to find a balance of like, yes, it's a road and track trip, but we're not going to keep you in the car every minute of the day for 10 hours because that gets exhausting. I don't think that's fun. I think you got to have a balance. And today we're going to Saratoga, which is a lovely place.
Well, and you had some nice dinner speakers, and the meals have been terrific. So I think it's a high quality experience for the participants.
Good. And
now I want to know what the next one is.
And how about my public speaking skills at the safety
You
briefing?
draw out the best in people, Matt. Other than your father, where you may not draw out the best. But it's all been fun, and I think a lot of these people want to know where the next one is, and where they can ship their car to, so they can participate somewhere in the country. It's interesting.
There's a lot of people at this one that are not local. They came from Florida, they came from Chicago, and I think people are excited to try new places, and that's why we keep adding new ones. We've got Colorado, we've got Arizona next year, and those are both fairly accessible from multiple different parts of the country.
But this drive and this location at this time of year is hard to match.
Yeah, it's good.
So,
and other than a little sprinkle here and there, it's been beautiful.
Fine.
Yeah,
it's been fine.
So I've had a lot of requests.
Okay.
For my people, our fans, to talk to you about business and things, and we've got quite a few topics to cover. Okay. Was you pre-screened, but was there anything on here that was a hard
whatever's
no?
interesting to the audience, cars, watches, and business. What a triangle.
Were there any cars on here? I don't know. Let's see.
Any cars that you drove that scared the heck out of me?
Well, I hope this one, of course, our questions coming from the Patreon, patreon.com/The Smoking Tire Podcast. You can get an ad-free listening experience. You can ask questions for our guests, up to and including my dad, and we'll get right to it. Vincent says, put this question in like within 5 minutes of us posting the topic, and I hope this is about me, but maybe it's not. What is your advice for raising a child who is aware of their privilege to be a compassionate, ambitious individual?
Wow.
I mean...
Well, first of all, make sure you have a wife who does most of the child raising, because my wife and your mother should take all the credit. But, you know, I think one of the things we tried to do with you and Alexis was for the family not to operate as a privileged family, meaning if we took a trip, we would fly coach to not, you know, communicate that we always fly first class. As you remember, I kept cars a lot longer than you thought I should, as you were encouraging me to change cars every year or two for something new.
Yeah, I had yeah.
And I was...
as I do now.
And as you do, well, that didn't work as you do now. But, you know, I would keep a car for 10 years if it was working and just said, you know, it's working and it's getting me where I need to go and I don't need to change. And I think also having you work early in your teenage life to experience what that was all about, getting a paycheck, having taxes taken out.
Well, I was pretty good at selling shoes.
Well, you picked the right profession and you were good at it and you made commission and you liked getting that paycheck. And
well, and unlike a lot of my friends at Rye Country Day School, you made me work. You didn't make me work, but you said I obviously wanted a car. That was the most important thing of my entire teenage experience, was having a car and driving. And so you said, if you want a car, you better get a job, and you know, and I'll help you, because it would be very difficult as a teenager to afford a safe car on that, you know, on that kind of budget. And so you matched what I could save. And I did save, and I ended up having a lot more ownership, responsibility of my car than some of my other friends did who were just given cars.
well, then you had pride because you earned it and you put a lot of hours into selling shoes at the time.
Sold a lot of shoes.
And those $35 paychecks, takes a lot of those to add up. I remember the conversation we had about leather or fabric seats. And I said, well, what's the difference? And you said it's $1,000. I said, okay, is it worth that many Sundays, Saturdays selling shoes at $35 a clip to get leather seats for $1,000? And it made you realize the value of, you know, what sounded like, well, it's only $1,000 difference, but when you got to do it $35, which is your after-tax paycheck, you got to do 30 Sundays on your hands and knees selling shoes.
I think I made more than $35
That was your
a day.
take home.
You're making that up.
No, I'm not.
I made more than $35 a day.
No, you did not. That was your paycheck.
You're making that up.
No, you were selling for 5 hours a day on a Sunday and you were making about $10 an hour. That was $50 and they took tax out.
I'm pretty sure I was getting maybe $200 to $300 a weekend, because I did get commission.
Well, maybe you were keeping some of the money to yourself and not telling me.
I was stashing it. I had a scam going, I guess. I was more than $35, but I'd still like cloth seats.
Well, there you go.
You trained me to like cloth seats. And now I won't shut up about the wool seats on this Volvo I want to get. They're the best, these fucking wool seats. And you know what? They cost extra.
Oh,
I gotta make 6 extra car review videos to afford the wool seats that cost extra in the Volvo.
Well, when you break it down to per paycheck, you realize the value of some of these things.
Okay, well, I think that answers that. Well, Alec Doby says, sort of a general question, what route should I invest in? Specifically, what are your thoughts on mutual funds? It's a pretty general question, but your strategy has always been...
I'm a very big believer in saving money and investing money as early, even if it's a small amount, but consistently when you can. Obviously, you have to take care of your bills and your obligations. But where you can save money, I like when compounding works in your favor, which means growth over time, each year adding more to the pile, because you're putting money in, and a mutual fund is the easiest and least expensive way to invest in growth. And if you reinvest the dividends, So they buy you more shares in the mutual fund. That compounds over time. I think it's very tough to win by individual stock picking. Even the best people, 80% of the time, can't match mutual funds' consistency and productivity. So
unless they're senators, then they have an unbelievable.
Okay, no comment.
Then they have an unbelievable.
Well, if you have inside information, it does increase your odds.
If you can legally insider trade, you are probably better off doing that.
But I think it sets you up over the course of years and decades of investing for the kind of nest egg and future needs, whether it's college or mortgages or even retirement. That compounding really works.
Yeah, I think you, not that you didn't treat yourself to some nice things here and there, but particularly, at least before I was like in college, when I was in school and stuff, you always kind of, we would talk about sort of deferring gratification and just keep rolling it, and over 20 years that added up to a lot.
It really did, because we had obligations, we had a mortgage, we had to take care of that, we had to take care of your schooling, but I really felt, and Mom felt the same way, that if we could save and invest, even if it was small amounts some years, larger other years, that compounding would set us up for a less stressful adult life, because at some point, your earning capacity goes down, you're not as able to make the same kind of money, and then you can live off those investments. You can live off the dividends or the compounding. If your mutual fund grows 7% a year, which isn't that astronomical, it doubles every 10 years. So as you put money in and it's doubling, and you put money in and it's doubling, it really compounds up pretty dramatically.
Yeah, and regarding the earning years, I think, you once said to me, when you're your late 30s until about 50 is your very peak earning years for most people, where you kind of have enough expertise to be well compensated and enough energy to work really hard. And so during that period, it's really best to...
Those are key years. Depending on your career and your profession, you could go as late as in your early 60s, but at some point, you don't have the energy, you don't have the stamina, you don't have the curiosity, and at that point, your savings and investments start giving you choices. It's really about having choices at that point.
Okay. Uber driver wants to know about your new Cayenne hybrid. Everyone wanted to know about your Cayenne. Your replacement for your old Cayenne was a very important topic of conversation, and I talked you. Not only did I talk you into a hybrid, out of a turbo and into a hybrid, but I talked you into getting paint to sample, which took 8 months longer than it should have. So my bad.
This was a big. After you trashed my black and. Brown.
Black over chocolate is heinous.
My unique car.
It was so ugly.
But the turbo Cayenne I love driving.
Yeah.
When it was time to get something else, I really liked the Cayenne, and you really...
And you kept that for, what was it? That car was like a 2017?
Yeah.
You kept it for like 6.5 years,
yeah.
Which is, that's a while.
And the hybrid, which I didn't have a lot of experience with, I've now had for several months. It's fantastic, because I realized that 80% of the time I'm driving 35 miles at a clip, and I plug it in and I never use gas, and maybe every 3 weeks I have to put some gas in where I have a one long trip. And the color, everybody stops and asks about it. I even had a guy who had a 911 who had a custom paint job in Greenwich, and he said, "I like your green better than my green. What is it?" I said, "It's a Matt Farah special." And
it's Goodwood green is what it's called.
It's Goodwood green, but it's gorgeous.
Do you actually know how rare that is? Folks, got to take a quick break from the action for just a second for NASCAR, who is a sponsor of today's episode. The competition on and off the track is heating up in the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, and with only one more race before the field is slashed in half one last time for the championship four, the playoffs head to Homestead-Miami Speedway in sunny South Florida. Nestled between the vibrancy of South Beach and the calm of the Keys, this track offers a one-of-a-kind racing experience. I've actually driven Homestead before, and it rules. It's win and you're in, so drivers will be using every inch of these action-packed mile-and-a-half oval to give themselves the best chance to secure a spot in the championship four. There's only a few more races in NASCAR's 75th anniversary season, so don't miss out. Get together with some good friends and tune in to the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs race at Homestead-Miami Speedway, Sunday, October 22nd, 2:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And we are brought to you today by Prize Picks. What is Prize Picks? Well, it's the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can test your skills on Prize Picks this football season. It's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and if you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. It's really simple to play. You can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And with the Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and CFB top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Prize Picks is awesome. It's easy. They've got weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts selected player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Go to prizepicks.com/tire and use code TIRE for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/tire and use code TIRE for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. And now back to the action on the Smoke and Tire podcast.
I don't.
So Town Porsche, Englewood, New Jersey, our favorite Porsche dealer, where my car came from and where you buy yours. That was the only paint to sample Cayenne they were allocated for the entire model year.
Oh, they allocate the number of cars you can.
The paint to sample program is so popular that they only allow a certain number of cars to actually be, because they can't do the volume, and particularly in 2023 with the war in the Ukraine, there were supply chain issues.
Oh, really?
With some of the paint, specifically the gold flake that they use in a lot of the paint colors. Now, your Goodwood green is non-metallic, so even though a lot of the paint to sample colors those orders were in many cases canceled and they couldn't get it, yours was able to go through because it was a non-metallic color.
That's incredible, because I was promised 3 months delivery and it took 11.
Well, it's that's what I get for, hey, get the paint to sample. They let you do it. Fine, you always buy these sucky colors. Get a good color, and it's a good thing you didn't have to turn in a lease, and you didn't mind driving your old car for a little while longer. But yes, to have a paint to sample Cayenne hybrid for model year 2023 is very, very rare.
Okay. Well, it's beautiful, and I love driving it. Yeah.
And the tan interior is very, very nice. And do you like the massage seats? I talked you into that one too.
Yes.
Remember, I talked you into it. You then forgot about it.
I couldn't figure out how to get it on.
Yeah, and I said, hey, how do you like the massage seats? And you go, do I have that? And I go, yeah, I sent you the build sheet. You paid for it.
How about the build sheet question you asked me about the stereo? You could get the entry level, the mid level, or the really expensive level.
Yeah.
And I said, Matt, I only listen to the news and the sports.
Yeah.
I don't think I need the really expensive level.
Yeah, we didn't need the $10,000 Burmeister stereo. Well, we said that there was 3. We said you should probably get the middle one, which was a Bose. And then 2 months later, they said, oh, they've discontinued the Bose. So you have to either get the free one, which is 6 speakers, or the Burmeister, which is 20, and it's 10,000. No, forget that.
Just to listen to sports and the news.
But it's interesting that, and I because I knew how you drive more or less, I knew that you would almost never use gas. And even though you liked the power of the turbo, I've driven you through hundreds of thousands of miles. You never use more than 20% throttle ever. So a 500 horsepower car for you makes no sense.
Psychologically, it felt good. I learned on this trip, you squeeze the accelerator. That was how I was driving, man.
Yeah.
I didn't jerk it.
I get it, but you missed the turbo seats.
I
The
did.
turbo has the sports seats.
They're good.
So notes to Porsche, allow customers to option the turbo seats in the regular.
That would be a good
in the
add-on,
hybrid.
yeah.
Well, maybe in 6 more years, they have a turbo hybrid.
Oh.
So if your mutual fund compounds a couple more times.
By then I'll be so old.
Yeah.
If I'm not using the turbo well now, can you imagine in 6 years?
The turbo hybrid has everything that the hybrid has, but paired with the engine out of the turbo.
Oh, that's good.
And it's like 700 horsepower. it's way over the top, but it's fun.
Okay.
I saw it for the car for the first time the other day, and even though it was kind of dirty because it's been raining, it was beautiful. And can't recommend the small wheels enough versus the big 22s you had on the turbo.
Yeah.
You get a better ride with the small wheels.
It's a beautiful
more
ride.
tire.
I love it.
Yeah. And now now we understand how hybrids work.
Yes, we do.
Zach says, not my Zach fan. I work as a superintendent for a large general contractor, and the push has been to multifamily housing as we have a continued national housing shortage and the COVID work from home, etc. With retail markets shrinking due to online shopping and the U.S. historically having an abundance of retail square footage, do you think we will have a necessity for more office retail space in the next 20 or so years? I think we have a surplus of both.
Right now we have a surplus because the whole way workforces have been retrained to do virtual work, whether it's Zoom or whatever you're using. Office buildings are really in trouble now because they're half empty. People are working 2 or 3 days maybe in the office, and there's a surplus that is a glut on the market, and a lot of people are not even able to pay their mortgage on a commercial building, and they're throwing the keys back to the bank, and the banks have to repossess the property.
Why do you think there isn't a cottage industry that is converting offices to apartments? Or is there, and I'm just not seeing it?
There is, where appropriate.
Yeah.
And where the building lends itself. Many of these commercial properties, which have nice parking, many of them have, even gyms or facilities, depending on the location, are being looked at for conversion. It's just beginning. I think people came out of the pandemic not knowing whether everybody would return to work the old way, whether there'd be hybrid working or, remote working. And I think as that settled into acceptance that we're not going back to the old way, I think a lot of these are turning into medical centers because the healthcare industry continues to grow. Some of them are being picked up by universities, and some of them are being converted to residentials because they make good apartment buildings.
Yeah. There's a guy up the street from my shop that finished a brand new beautiful office building in September of 2021. And I don't think it's got a single tenant in it.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's
really tough.
I would not want to be in the commercial office business right now.
Well, remember when we built your building, we designed it with the flexibility that one day if somebody wanted to turn it into offices, they could. But
we have 2 sets of plans.
Don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
I think we can probably throw the other set of plans away. Yeah, it was if this parking business is actually a failure, and I don't know what I'm talking about, we've got a backup, and we could have converted WCCS into 12 office suites. Oh boy, here's the mower. Alrighty then. We have come inside because the mower simply will not stop. It's okay. So we're
flexible.
We're in a hotel room at Scribner's Lodge here, so which is actually kind of cute. All right, where were we? We talked about commercial real estate. So the conclusion of that was that we do not think there will be a need for more new commercial retail or office space in the next 20 years.
I think that's 20 years is a long time, but at least for the foreseeable future, I don't see anybody building. There's just so much excess availability and high quality buildings.
Yeah. But it's as we drive through these Catskills towns, the hollowing out of local retail is sad.
It is very sad. We saw so many local retailers who went out of business. Maybe it was the pandemic, maybe it was shopping online, maybe it was a Walmart or some other big box retailer, but building after building totally empty and nobody finding a reuse for them.
Yeah. So what happens to those properties?
Well, I think that communities like this, they're an hour and a half, 2 hours from New York. I think if people can work a couple days remotely and go into a New York job a day or two a week, I think you may see restaurants, small, shops re-emerging. Maybe not the local hardware store, maybe not, the kind of stores that were there before. But even where you got married, Hudson Valley, there was a regeneration of a town that became more of an artist community.
Yeah, and that town, I think, Hudson in particular, because it was this beautiful town with these beautiful old buildings, but there was also an Amtrak stop that went directly into New York City. So you could walk to that Amtrak station and in 90 minutes be in New York City.
But that town was rebuilt pre-COVID, so people were commuting. I think now in a hybrid mode, you could drive the hour and a half a couple days a week and still get the benefit of living in this beautiful environment.
Yeah.
I think that will be the impetus for some of these towns being rebuilt. But right now, it is sad.
Yeah. Because you're now, you're the worst retiree ever.
I have flunked.
You're horrible at retiring. How many attempts at retiring have you had? 4? 5?
I stopped counting.
I think it's
not good.
Right around the time Seinfeld stopped counting money, you stopped counting.
But he's coming back.
Seinfeld?
Yeah.
Well, he can't sit still, so he needs to do something.
Yeah.
But do I've seen some studies that say there's a 15% improvement in productivity with home remote work. I've seen other studies that say there's a 10% reduced productivity with that home work. You now you go to an office for some parts of your job, and then you also take a lot of Zoom calls at home. And what do you in your experience, what is the productivity versus happiness of home versus in-person work? Guys, we got to take one more quick break for a sponsor I am particularly passionate about, BetterHelp. They have advertised on our videos before, and now they are over here at the podcast, and this show's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I like BetterHelp a lot because they make talk therapy easier. Right? Finding a new therapist can be really hard if you don't already have one, right? And sometimes your brain can get in its own way. You could be going through a tough time in life, or you could have, a proper clinical disorder like depression or anxiety, and therapy can help figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. And whether or not you've been in therapy before, I have been in therapy for like 20 years, and I think it's really worthwhile. It's helped me learn about myself. It's helped me come up with better strategies for living. It's helped give me ways to think about situations that I'm in professionally and personally from another perspective. And I can tell things to my therapist that I don't necessarily want to say to either my wife or my family or my friends. And I know this person will give me a balanced and experienced perspective. But it's really hard to find the new therapist, right? Especially in our sort of post-COVID world. I've tried to find therapists in person before, and it is a challenge. And you may live somewhere where, frankly, there aren't very many therapists, or there isn't a therapist that you can personally relate to. And so BetterHelp is a better way of doing it. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with one of thousands of licensed therapists that work with BetterHelp. And if you don't like who they've got you with, it's no problem, because you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. It's great. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/smokingtire today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/smokingtire to get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. What is the productivity versus happiness of home versus in-person work?
Well, I think what's happening now is there is a consensus that it's very hard for team building or spontaneous interaction, or in creative environments, the need to be able to bounce ideas on and off. That has to be done in person. So talent development, talent management. I mean, thank God we had virtual meetings during COVID, because we got a lot done virtually, and certain jobs you can do from home, certain jobs you can do a couple days a week from home. But I think the work population's going to have to accept that not all jobs can be done 5 days a week at home. And I'm happy to have some meetings by Zoom, but believe me, if I have to sit through a board meeting from 8 in the morning till 5 at night staring at a screen all day, I'm climbing the walls by 3 o'clock. I mean, it's really hard for me. And it removes the spontaneous go down the hall, talk to somebody, have a interaction. And so I think every business is trying to find a way to be fair to the employees, and also at the same time, you know, the business has to be successfully supported with whatever the strategies are. So I do believe hybrid is here to stay, and that's back to the commercial real estate issue, which is people don't need the same footprint.
Yeah.
You know, at CVS, we have a program we're in the middle of that will reduce the office square footage by 40% over a couple of years, because we can do hoteling, you can have shared office space.
What's hoteling?
Well, you have access to a office or a desk, but somebody else may use it on the 2 days you're not there.
Yeah.
Not everybody has a dedicated office.
Right.
And I think that's probably the way of the future.
That term makes sense, but I've never heard it before. Okay, Jonathan says, how much overlap is there between your approach to managing people in a company versus raising kids? A lot of parenting questions here.
Ooh, well, they're so pleased with how you turned out. They think I have the secret sauce, which I don't.
No, when I was a kid, you went to work. That was what you did, and Mom did a lot of things. And now, as an adult, you know, you have a, you know, you and I have a different relationship, but that notwithstanding,
I think there is a common thread that is, if you teach people in your family, your children, otherwise, or you try to teach people at work good values, you try to teach them how to reason through problems, you try to teach them how to be patient and compassionate. Those are behaviors that equally apply in an office environment or in parenting. But you also have to accept every child is different. Every child has different needs or interests. And I think at work, one size doesn't fit all. What you have to do to work with one person may not apply to the next person. So there are some core guidelines, family rules, some business rules, and then I think you have to deal with each person individually.
And Jonathan also says, have you ever been a passenger on a racetrack with me driving? And was it fun, scary, or something else?
It was scary.
You came out with me at Monticello in a McLaren 570.
That's exactly what I was going to. Matt said, let me take a couple laps around, and then you can do it. And I'll show you the lines, and then you can drive the car. Halfway through one lap, I said, Matt, you got to let me out. I can't do this. Yeah. I was tapped out. Happy to watch you. I sat there all day watching you. I could not do it. It scared the heck out of me.
But it wasn't my driving in particular. It was just...
It was a very fast, a lot of turns. It was over my capacity to take on risk at that stage of my life. If I were probably younger, I could have done it. But halfway through the first lap, remember I said,
"Yeah, you tapped out.
Let me out of this
and
car."
You've never attempted it again since.
Correct.
Tony Rodriguez Salgado says, Have you ever driven or owned your dream car, and if not, what is your dream car basically?
Well, over the years I had a fantasy about buying a Jaguar XKE when they were, these sleek, hunter green kind of cars. I'm not sure I could have fit in it very well, so
probably not. It would probably be very
and I always thought I'd get it one day, and I kept pushing it off, and I didn't. I always had the fantasy about.
Now Mom has the green F-Type.
We spec'd that out in
sort of close,
in as close as we could get to it.
Yeah,
and that's a fun car.
Yeah, it's nice.
But it's always the sports car.
Didn't you do? I mean, I would have put you for a James Bond Aston DB5.
Well, I was going to say, when I got a little older, the DB5 was certainly the fantasy car. Grew up on Goldfinger, where that car was introduced, with all the gadgets. And actually, I went to a New York car show once where that literal car was being offered for sale.
Yeah.
For, at the time, a lot of money, like $300,000.
Yeah, now it's probably $5 million.
Now it's...
So, Aston has done a continuation series of those.
Oh, you're kidding.
They built like 10 with all the James Bond shit in it. So it
really?
Literally has a functional
you can use
smoke screen,
really?
A functional, and they're like $2 million. And even the 60s like sat nav screen, it's like behind this thing. It like rolls up.
Yep.
Like a roll top desk almost, and behind it is actually a modern sat
version
nav
of
screen.
that. Wow!
But it has
ejector seat and everything.
I don't know about the ejector seat, but it has like the spinning license plate. It has the little rocket things that come out the front.
About the bulletproof lead shield that comes up out of the back.
I don't know the complete list, but my friend Chris Harris drove it, and it has a functional oil slick and smoke screen.
Wow.
I once saw someone put a smoke screen in their car and use it on the highway, and it was one of the most dangerous things
that's scary.
I've ever seen anybody do in a car.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm not sure. And what kind of engine did they put in it?
The original engine. It's the old inline six.
Yeah.
It's actually it's true to form mechanically, and it's true to movie prop the rest of the way. But your mutual funds, you just sell a few of those, and you could be in a James Bond DB5.
Okay.
But other than that,
those were probably the two dream cars, and
that's really it, huh?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Christian says, do you invest in private companies such as startups? Like, you don't really pick individual
I don't.
investments. No.
My experience when I was working was I was so involved in work or traveling the world that trying to track individual stocks or individual companies while I was working was very difficult. And I always thought, I had some view about a stock or a company, but I didn't have the time to think about when to get in and when to get out. My risk taking was really on my primary business. Whenever I worked at a company, I had equity in that, so I had a concentration of wealth in a single company. And then I just let the mutual funds compound, or tax-free bonds throw off tax-free interest.
Yeah.
And that's the way I balance risk and reward through, multiple assignments.
You've never talked to me once about an individual investment. I mean, it's never been like, I found this company and...
I'm respectful of people who can do that and do it well, but I think the odds are against me doing it well, and so I kind of knew my sweet spot.
My name is a verb says, what was your managerial awakening? The moment where you realized that if you were going to be in charge of people, you had to be the best version of yourself so they could depend on you, but also respect you.
I think, when you move from an individual performer to a manager, whether you're managing 1 or 2 people or a team of 10 or even a bigger team, you really have to set a high standard for personal integrity, fairness, being a good listener, but being decisive. People don't like working for a boss who's inconsistent, who doesn't work hard, who's not fair to, the whole team. And I think fair means also promoting the people who perform and also weeding out the people who don't perform, because the team knows who's not contributing properly. And if you don't address that, either trying to coach or train them up, or in the end make a change, the team loses faith in you. And so now you get higher up and you manage a bigger team, it's hundreds of people or thousands of people or tens of thousands of people. How you lead, how you communicate, how you made your values known changes somewhat, but it's still what causes people to respect their boss or their boss's boss. I think that's consistent whether it's a small team or a big team.
Okay. Josh says, I find the topic of corporate espionage weird and fascinating. I've only worked at small companies where this isn't commonplace. I'm curious if any competitive brands have used corporate espionage against any one of your companies that you're aware of. Is it common in the corporate world or is it rare?
Corporate espionage is an interesting topic, so you're right. And I would broaden that into both espionage and counterfeit, because a lot of companies I've been involved with, people have counterfeit knockoffs of high-value products, whether it's using the name Tiffany in their marketing, whether it's copying or altering
you've got the
Ralph Lauren.
Quote, Chinatown fakes, right?
The Chinatown
fakes. But then you've got stuff like when you were at Ralph Lauren and someone started U.S. Polo Association, which is
they're drafting off your success. Also, factories that are producing product for you are making enough to backdoor to somebody else to sell at a discounted place to a discounted retailer. So there's that. And then there's flat out espionage, which a lot of companies are very worried about China now and their ability to hack into your systems and steal intelligence, whether it's military intelligence or corporate intelligence. You go to China now, they tell you not to leave your iPad or laptop in your room, that people will come in and download what's on it to steal your intelligence. So it's a significant issue, particularly in companies that are on the cutting edge of something new. If you're just making a widget over and over again, there's probably not a lot to steal. So you have to be vigilant. There's also a way of hiring your employees and asking them to bring trade secrets with them when they come. Bring reports, bring intelligence that you shouldn't be taking.
Yeah.
And I've been involved, which I won't go into, where some employees left to go somewhere else and they downloaded information they weren't legitimately allowed to and tried to bring it with them to a new company, and we ended up in lawsuits. So it's a real issue and it's prevalent.
I had a company I won't mention that I worked with professionally, had access to a lot of information about my business that I would not give to a competitor. With the knowledge of that, and they opened a competing business very close to me.
Well, there you go.
And it happens in small businesses too.
Yep.
Okay. Amateur 911 says, with the rise in social media, there also seems to be the rise in fast fashion. What can the traditional fashion industry do to curtail this wasteful behavior? I've listened to Matt talk about decreasing our emissions and carbon footprint through other lifestyle means instead of buying huge heavy vehicles. Do you share the same this is sort of two separate questions. So one is fast fashion versus lasting fashion, and the other is, do you share my sentiment about wastefulness?
Well, the first issue in fast fashion
related,
is there are companies who do some testing of product. They put product in different parts of the country at different prices to see how it will sell. But you need a supply chain once the customer has voted to be able to turn around and make that product fast enough to get it in season. So for instance, you can test product in May or June. The customer reaction then gets put into your supply chain. Can you get that product remade and back into the marketplace in 60 days? That's fast fashion. Sometimes you can interchange fast fashion with disposable fashion. So it's good for the year and you throw it out afterwards?
That's how I know that term. The first half of what you just said there is not what I personally equate to fast fashion, but
well, the first half of what I said is the true fast fashion.
Right.
Disposable fashion means looks good for a year, doesn't hold up over time, probably end up getting rid of it. That creates the waste you're talking about.
Yeah.
Real fast fashion is where you can test and react and get it back into the marketplace with a certainty that it's going to sell. So you have less risk. Most production cycle, even for apparel, is 12 months. So I don't know 12 months from now what October of 24 is going to sell. So I got to take certain assumptions, and I guess right on some, and some I miss, and those get marked down. Fast fashion literally is test and react. Disposable fashion is throw it out.
I think most non-industry people conflate those two.
Yeah.
Well, or don't know about the first one at all, and just because it's used in BuzzFeed articles and whatever. The disposable one is the term that's used more often.
Yes. Well, they're two different subjects.
Yeah, but with Ralph Lauren is a good example because the stuff they make for the most part lasts a really long time.
So the fashion is more classic. It's more multi-year in its appeal. The quality will last you for a very long time. And if you put your wardrobe together, you only need a couple pieces and you can look good, and you can look good for years. The things that are trendy and disposable tend to be for younger customers who want to move on a year later. But that stuff is really what creates the waste. And so I think you got to balance the role we all play in the environment. And
but you haven't really been part of a company that makes that stuff.
No, that's not been my career.
Maybe the closest you ever got was like Foot Locker, where you're doing socks. But
in Foot Locker, we used to take used sneakers and take the rubber off them, and we would build basketball courts in neighborhoods all over the United States from the used rubber from the used sneakers. So even there, we tried to take that material and give it a second life as a basketball court.
Yeah.
So.
Rich B says, I'm a school principal. I make okay money, but it has a ceiling. I'm working on building wealth on a fixed salary income. Would you go the real estate route, the market, or something else? And you already talked about the mutual funds and compounding.
Yeah, I think that most people's primary investment is in their personal residence. And so, assuming you have a residence that you like and you think is in a right location, that over time should appreciate. There'll be ups and downs. And that ought to be your first view because you're living in it, it's providing shelter, and it's investment. If you have money beyond that to invest, I would probably go into mutual funds, partly because they're more liquid. Anytime, any day, if you need the money, you can sell it. When you go into real estate and you're in a fixed income, occupation, if you need that money and the market's soft and you have to sell, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And so I like the liquidity of the market, which should grow over time at a comparable rate to real estate.
Okay. Meh, that's his username. Meh says, I'm going to paraphrase here. Meh makes a good living, is successful, but am recently being inundated with requests from extended family, etc., to, quote, partner with me on this or invest in their new business or struggling business. How can I deal with these types of requests?
That's a very interesting question and very relevant, and most people have some version of that going on. My answer to that, which does not make it right for everybody, but my answer to that was, I will always help if I can with medical issues or educational support so that you can further your life. What I will not do is invest in your lifestyle that you can't afford on your own, or invest in businesses that generally go bad, and now you've created a very animosity kind of relationship.
Yeah.
So health and or education, if I can, call me. If it's lifestyle support, don't call me.
That's, I think that's very fair. I once, you know who Kevin O'Leary is?
Yeah.
He's kind of a dick, but he makes a point sometimes, you know? And I once heard I heard him on a podcast, I think it was with Tom Segura, where he said that for every member of his family, he offers a one-time free money, which is, I need 50 grand, I need 100 grand, and he doesn't want it back. He will, and he makes
a gift.
It's a gift, but they only get to ask once, and he makes them sign a thing saying this is the agreement, I'm giving you this is your one get. And then if they ever ask again, he holds up the paper, you agreed, this is the one ask. I like your method better, but I think that's, for him, what he said was, it eliminates that awkwardness of, I gave you the money and now I need to bug you for it back, or I gave you the money and you spent it in a way I don't approve of. You know,
it's very hard with family or even very good friends.
Yeah.
I also have had a variety of friends who have come to me and said, will you invest in my business? And my answer has been no. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, I'm not even evaluating. I know it's going to ruin the friendship.
Yeah.
So I stick with my point of view, which again may not be for everybody, but to date, that's how I've operated, and I think I've been clear with the family on that.
Ryan says, John Maxwell, you know who John Maxwell is?
No.
I don't either, but he wrote, quote, success is when I add value to myself, but significance is when I add value to others. Okay, does that resonate with you, and if so, have you seen this play out in your life?
Well, it's an interesting play on words. I think, the sentiment that's being expressed is valid, which is you've got to take care of yourself first, and then you can add to the world. I think you can do both. Every situation's different. I think you can do both. I think if you're fortunate enough in your own life and your career, you have an obligation to give back. And what that means to you or your family is different, perhaps, but I don't think you can just be a taker and be a consumer and, every time you get some success, it's all about me. I think you got to find a balance there.
Okay. We don't have enough time for all of these, but and so there's some that have been asked in previous shows with you about leadership and stuff, so I'm going to skip over those, and if I don't get to yours, I'm sorry. Okay. DWBF11, if this person given 15 minutes with a member of your company's board of directors as a rising internal business leader, what would you ask them in order to make a memorable and positive impression?
I think you have to start with what does a board of directors do? And a board of directors is charged with oversight of the CEO and the senior management in terms of strategy and culture and assessing risk. I think if a 15-minute time slot was given to somebody in a company, I think a board would like to hear an honest assessment of the current state of affairs in a company and or an idea on how to make it better. We regularly on the boards I'm on try to have lunch or dinners with a group of mid-level people, and we really try to listen to them unfiltered by senior management or the CEO to really find out what's going on underneath the senior level, and I always find those to be fascinating.
Okay. Manita says, is there a skill or attribute with an employee or manager that you've observed to be particularly rare and valuable? Your ability to do math is, I've never met anybody that can do math at the speed that you can do four-function math.
Well, that has served me well.
Yeah, but that could serve anybody well. I mean, if
that would certainly be a life skill that I would encourage people to develop to the best of their ability. I really believe, and as a part of that conversation, Matt, we've had this in the past.
Yeah,
your ability to know where you want the conversation to go. Some of it has math applied to it, some of it isn't. But you don't want to be in a management position where you're just counterpunching to what people say. You really want to be able to have a point of view about where you want a conversation to go and where the questions need to go and how you get there and the journey you take people on to get there. I don't think a lot of people have that. And I couple it with math because it's worked to my advantage, but others can play that three-dimensional chess without the math piece and they'll be better off for it.
Tim is asking for best book recommendations for entrepreneurs and business managers, if you have any.
Wow.
I read, my brother-in-law John gave me a lot of books to read, which is some really good ones are The E-Myth is one that is great. The letter E, the E-Myth. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which has a very cheeky title, but is actually a very useful book. Never Split the Difference is a good one.
Interesting titles.
Never Split the Difference. It's like negotiate as if your life depends on it or something like that.
Wow.
Those three I got from John, and those are really good.
Well, you've read more of those books than I have. I grew up reading autobiographies of successful people to, see how they did it and whether they were corporate or entrepreneurs. Many of the most successful corporations were started by entrepreneurs, whether it was Henry Ford or, Watson at IBM or Steve Jobs. I just picked up the Elon Musk book. I'm really just starting it. I'll, be interested to see how that, Walter Isaacson's a terrific writer. He wrote the Steve Jobs book. I'm anxious to see what he says, but I think you probably have more experience with those kind of books than I do.
I mean,
because you're an entrepreneur,
and I'm very self-conscious about not knowing what I'm doing. So I try to, and John was a great entrepreneur and built a company from nothing, and so.
But he was a decade older.
But that's why I would go to him.
Yeah.
For me to ask you for business advice is great, but it only gets me so far because you've never run a company that small, whereas he went from 0 to 50 employees, which is the size of the field I'm playing on.
Yeah, I remember when you asked me about a system to do accounts, the payroll system.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to tell you because I never had to think about the payroll getting...
that came from John. Okay, this one may be a little political, but what are your thoughts from Kevin? What are your thoughts on trickle-down supply-side economics and tax codes written to benefit corporations and the wealthy? Do you believe that bottom-up or middle-out tax policy has its merits?
Yeah, I think the United States was founded on the middle class being successful. And you could go through the history of the United States. There were always some uber wealthy people at different stages who had different ways of building wealth, some of which, we look back now and say they weren't so ethical or they didn't, play by the rules. But the United States was founded on a work ethic and a middle class success. And I think if we as a country don't ensure that the middle class succeeds, we will not be successful in the future. And so whether it's tax policy or fiscal policy or any of the ways government can help manage, it's got to be aimed to the middle class winning. And it's got to be aimed for the people entering the workforce to succeed over time. If it doesn't do that, and it only allows the very small number of people to succeed on a greater scale, that will be our downfall.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the most successful years of the middle class were the result of either post-World War II incentives and stuff like the GI Bill and college grants and homes and those types of industries, or New Deal era policies that gave safety nets to people and public education and funding for infrastructure and all that kind of stuff.
But without being political, I believe strongly in being in an environment where people can get a helping hand, whether it's insurance or whether it's home ownership or whether it's education. What I'm not as supportive of is just being given free benefits without having to do some amount of work to support yourself. I think over time that leads down a slippery slope.
Miguel says, I often think of wealthy, successful business people as, quote, big brain type people. Is there a certain character quality required to gain this level of success? I'm just a mechanic and struggle with things like this. I can't possibly fathom being the type of person who would be successful on that level. Is it okay to simply not be that kind of big brain person?
Certainly okay. You have to know yourself. You have to be comfortable with what you do. But my guess is even in the work you do, you probably can think about ways it could be done more efficiently. You could be supported in your work better. And even on a smaller scale, it doesn't have to be a big corporate success. You probably could find ways of contributing to the success of the company you're working with or your own business and improve results. So you can start small. It doesn't have to be deep thoughts.
In a lot of the books I've read, especially another good book is called Build by Tony Fadell. And Tony was the guy who was working for Steve Jobs and designed the iPod and then the Nest thermostat later. And he's like genius and super rich and was a great team builder. And it was important to identify the difference between a technician and a leader. And some people are amazing technicians and can have amazing careers being great technicians, but then they try to get, quote, promoted to leadership positions and they don't have that skill and they fail, whereas they should have been nurturing the technician side to make them great at that, and then they could make a fantastic living just as a technician.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before. I think the individual contributor, broadly defined as to what you're describing as the technician, the sense is I got to climb the ladder, I got to be promoted, I got to be a manager, I got to oversee people. They're different skills. And I think even as a mechanic, maybe you can tweak a tool that can make your job better, or you can organize your space in a more efficient way. And I think there's always something that within your capacity you can contribute to a better and more successful environment. But everybody's not going to be a big brain success.
Yeah. Okay. I have one more, and that is the end. Although Prashan, who's a good patron, says your advice last time got me a raise.
Oh boy!
So there we go. We'll take a 3% kickback on that. You got.
I hope you invested, and I hope it's compounding while you're sleeping.
Yeah. He says, and the question is, I'm prepping to get an MBA. I have an engineering background with 3 years experience. What other industries could I move to with a background? I don't know if you have an answer to this, honestly. With a background of engineering plus MBA, I don't really want to work in tech or defense. Well, depending on what kind of engineering, I mean, people build things, people make things.
You know, over the years, it's interesting. I've hired a lot of engineers to build warehouses, build distribution centers, build manufacturing facilities. The use for an engineer, and even in the company I'm involved with called Progressive Auto Insurance, they have a ton of engineers that work in that environment to create, you know, breakthroughs and things that will help the company. I think an engineering background with an MBA is an incredible marrying of skills, and I would buy stock in your future career, because I think you're on the road to success if you can put those two together.
And the very last question, because we actually have to get going and hit the road in a few minutes. One piece of advice you would give someone trying to improve their leadership skills, and that's from Micah Moore.
Well, I think it depends on the individual and what exactly you're good at now and what you're not so good at. But, and again, we've touched on this. Leadership for me is the ability to inspire the best out of your team. What do you have to do to bring out the best? Whether it's work harder, be more intellectually curious, be more detailed in your work. And I think individual leadership skills bring out the best in the team they're overseeing. And I think that kind of customized advice for your team is what will make you a better leader over time.
Okay, I think that's
Thanks,
good.
Matt. It's
Yeah,
great.
there we go.
Up here in the Catskills.
Up here in the Catskills, we're going to get back in the M8. Unfortunately, it's not a Cadillac Blackwing and has the stupid carbon fiber seats, but
it's a little
fine.
It's a little hugging.
It's a little huggy. It's a little stiff
Yeah.
for this journey.
It's
but,
okay. It's
but
fun.
It's fine. And we're going to drive to Saratoga Springs, and then we're going to go back to Connecticut, and then I'm going to come back to Los Angeles, and I'll be back in the studio with Zach next week. Thank you to our patrons for your questions. They're great, as always. And for the ones I didn't get to, most of the ones I didn't get to, there was 4 or 5, they actually, they overlaid previous shows.
Okay.
So there was stuff we covered already. So it was either close to that or whatever. And we're limited time because we got to get in the car and go drive. So thanks. We'll see you later. Thanks, Dad.
Take care. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.